Today I wanted to talk about carbon macromolecules. These are large molecules that make up the bodies of you and all the other living organisms on Earth. This is actually a picture taken straight from NASA. They know from various instruments they have in space that there are various large carbon molecules floating around the universe, but it seems that it's only on Earth that we know that these molecules have come together in sufficient numbers and concentrations to make life as we know it. When we say organic compounds, what we're talking about is those with carbon atoms in them. Inorganic, on the other side, do not have carbons and hydrogens that make them up. Organic compounds include a variety of types that we'll talk about today: the carbohydrates, the lipids, proteins, and nucleic acids. On the other side, inorganic compounds include things familiar to us like water, as well as electrolytes like sodium, potassium, calcium, chlorine, etc., and carbon dioxide, oxygen, and other such gases. You may remember from the last video, there are four major types. These types are illustrated here for you. The key to read here, by the way, is at the bottom. These brown atoms are carbons. The reds are the oxygens. The light blues are hydrogens. The dark blues, seen here in proteins and in nucleic acids, are nitrogen. And the yellows are phosphorus atoms. Also included are sulfurs. Sulfurs are found in proteins, but they're not in this particular one. Before we go any further, we should distinguish between monomers and polymers. Monomers we can think of as subunits. They make up polymers. You put together lots of different monomers to make a polymer. The molecules we'll look at today are mainly polymers. If we look at a cell, we can see that various parts of the cell are made of very many different types of molecules. Familiar to us maybe would be things like DNA, which is a type of nucleic acid. As well, you have a variety of lipids that make up the membrane, and you have carbohydrates used for storage as well as for making certain structures in the cell. And proteins are parts of almost the whole cell, that they enable the function of the cell and make up the structures of it as well. So this is our first macromolecule. Structures such as the chloroplast would have carbohydrates like starch in them. Starch is a storage molecule. Carbohydrates generally function as energy storage molecules, and they also can make up certain structures in your cell. The polymer here is a giant molecule made of thousands or maybe hundreds of thousands or maybe millions of monomers, like this one, a monosaccharide or simple sugar. So, we can differentiate between monosaccharides and disaccharides simply. A monosaccharide is one sugar, like glucose, fructose, or galactose. A disaccharide is two of these sugars stuck together. On the other side, these polysaccharides, poly indicates many, saccharide again being sugar, are made of many of these monomers, these small subunits stuck together. This is glycogen, one example of a polysaccharide. These are actually familiar to us, maybe not something you knew you were consuming, but in the plants that we eat, the carbohydrate is mainly starch. In the animals that we eat, the carbohydrate, at least the storage carbohydrate, is glycogen. Both are gigantic molecules made of many glucose subunits stuck together. The last is cellulose. This is found as part of the cell wall. This is actually a very rigid material. Long strands of these are woven together to make the fabric of the cell wall itself. This is fiber for us, that we cannot digest this material, and it serves as roughage to keep your digestive system in good working order and keeps everything moving. These simple carbohydrates are sweet. Complex carbohydrates are not. When we look at the foods that are involved, the simple carbohydrates include very sugary foods, cake, and as well as syrup and milk and fruits. On the other side, the complex carbohydrates include things like rice and grain and potatoes. The problem here is that whenever you eat large polysaccharides like starch or glycogen, starch in plants, glycogen in animals, it's digested or broken down into its component glucose molecules, that these monomers then dumped into the bloodstream. However, if you do have too much carbohydrate over many years, that prolonged high blood glucose levels can actually damage your body and lead to a condition known as diabetes, People with diabetes have damage to certain organs caused by persistent high blood glucose levels, and they constantly need to test their blood for their blood glucose levels to make sure that they're within reasonable limits to prevent further damage to their body, which can potentially even lead to death. So it's important to control your carbohydrate intake, not have too many sugary foods, especially to reduce your risk of developing diabetes later in life. Our next macromolecule, lipids. Certain cells in your body are specialized to store lipids. The lipids are hydrophobic. They don't mix well with water. They're made of these long chains of carbons with hydrogens attached. These non-polar molecules do not have regions that attract to water, which makes them very effective for actually creating barriers between the outside and the inside of your cell. That you can have an environment inside the cell made up of water with very many other molecules floating around inside that will not be diluted easily by water from the environment coming in and ruining this nice, secure, homeostatic environment. These lipids that make up the membrane form a bilayer. There are two layers of them that the hydrophobic regions of them keep water from entering. These molecules are always in motion. This cell membrane is considered fluid for this region. There's another lipid molecule apart from these long chains that you might be familiar with, which is cholesterol. Cholesterol has been vilified in the media because of its role in heart disease. The thing is, cholesterol is an important part of your cell membranes and is a necessary component of the food that we eat. It's produced by your liver, is also digested and absorbed from the food that you eat, and then dumped into the bloodstream so your cells can remove it from the bloodstream and use it to make up their cell membranes. It actually prevents the cell membranes from freezing, from getting too jammed up, and preventing molecules from moving across it. The thing is, if you have too much cholesterol, especially in the food that you eat, or maybe from some genetic condition, that what can happen is that this cholesterol starts building up in your blood vessels, potentially blocking them. This means your heart has to work harder just to move blood around your body. And as well, what can happen is that this blood vessel might get blocked entirely, thereby shutting off blood supply and oxygen to various parts. This can happen in various organs, including the heart, and lead to death because of organ failure. Kind of looks like fried eggs, the same kind of consistency. Fried eggs are a good analogy because they are high in cholesterol. Each egg contains about 70% of your daily intake of cholesterol. So this is possibly a good analogy. So again, it is important to limit your intake, especially of meat products that might have large amounts of cholesterol in them. Our next polymer, proteins. Proteins, again, make up almost every structure in your body as well as enabling most of the functions of your body. That proteins such as this, the intermediate filaments, are made of long chains of amino acids. The specific sequence of these amino acids, as well as the folded structure of the final molecule, determines its structure as well as its function. Proteins have a variety of functions in your body, including defending you from various outside pathogens, as well as carrying out chemical reactions, as well as sending messages and making up structures in the body. Pause the video right now to read a little more about the functions of proteins. The actual instructions for making proteins are found in your DNA. A gene is a name given to a small section of your DNA that is used for coding for proteins. That based on different genes, you make different proteins with different amino acid sequences, which are then folded up in unique ways so that the protein can carry out its function in your cells. We know this, that all cells in your body have the same DNA, but different parts of your DNA are read and carried forward at different times to enable the different structures and functions of different cells in your body. So all cells will express certain genes, will make certain proteins. These housekeeping proteins will keep them alive. But different cells, like the red blood cell or the muscle cell or the pancreatic cell, will make different other proteins in order to carry out their specialized function. Red blood cells might have large amounts of hemoglobin being made. Muscle cells might have large amounts of myosin to enable their contraction, and pancreatic cells may make large amounts of insulin to actually send messages around the body. We can find this out by tagging certain molecules onto a protein so we can visualize where it's being made in the body. This is a mouse embryo which has the protein noggin being tagged with the color green. So you can see that noggin is made in the developing embryo's bones especially. When a protein is made, it's put together in a certain sequence. The amino acid sequence determines its function as well. The folded structure is different from one protein to another. So the different folded structure of each protein determines its function in the body. Every protein has a different amino acid sequence and different folded structure, and therefore a different function as well. This is hemoglobin, a protein you might be familiar with, found in your blood, reacts with oxygen, carries oxygen around your body. This is pepsin, an enzyme, a molecule that carries out chemical reactions found in your stomach that breaks down other proteins into their component monomers. This is insulin, a signaling molecule made by your pancreas, sent around the body. This is collagen, which is the reason that your face is stretchy, that if you pull on your skin, it deforms and then reforms because of long fibers of collagen that are elastic and underlie your skin itself. If your environment changes, the proteins can deform. These proteins are actually held together by hydrogen bonds. If the temperature rises too high, for example, it can actually vibrate apart this protein and therefore destroying its function. This can also happen at extremes of pH as well. So it's important, for example, if you have a fever, that you do get medical help if the fever is prolonged, that the high temperatures in your body can actually deform the proteins and can lead to death as well. This is our last macromolecule, the nucleic acids, that they're made of long strands of nucleotides put together. These nucleotides contain carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, and phosphorus as well. This is the most famous type of nucleic acid that you might be familiar with, the DNA strand. That you might know, in your cells, DNA is enclosed in the nucleus. These chromosomes, or long chains of DNA, are actually made of DNA compiled with proteins in where this double helix is actually folded to compact the 6 feet of DNA in your cells into a space that is many thousands of times smaller than that. Up here is a simplified version of the DNA double helix. This is slightly more technical down here. It shows you that these two strands are actually held together by hydrogen bonds between these bases, these A's, C's, T's, and G's. And these bases are connected on the outside by sugars and phosphates. This here is one nucleotide made of a phosphate, a sugar, and a base, connected to another nucleotide on the other strand. DNA and RNA, another similar and related compound, are actually quite similar in many ways. They do have a variety of bases, they do have sugars and phosphates as well, but RNA is a single strand and uses the bases C, G, A, and U rather than C, G, A, and T in double-stranded DNA. The function of DNA and RNA is to enable the production of proteins in your body. Again, proteins carry out all the functions of your body and make up many structures in your body as well. So the DNA contains the instructions, the RNA copies the instructions, and the proteins are actually made from the instructions in there. That the different sequences of A's, T's, C's, and G's in your DNA affects the final product. If you imagine different words being spelt using different letters mean different things, in the same way, by changing the sequence of letters in your DNA changes the final product that is made. This last step may be thought to be analogous to the way that if you go to old buildings or to graves and you do charcoal rubbings, where you rub a piece of charcoal on a piece of paper on top of this impression or these old letters, that you get this shape appearing. This is analogous to this structure right here, because by changing the letters that underlie this protein's structure, you can actually change what protein is assembled by changing the letters that lie underneath. So, in summary, here we have our 4 types of macromolecules: the carbohydrates, the lipids, the proteins, and the nucleic acids, made of many smaller subunits. And these subunits are put together in particular orders to actually make the final structure.